Cillian Murphy had to fight for the role of Tommy Shelby. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while because that sentence sounds wrong. It's impossible to imagine anyone else in the part. But when Stephen Knight first wrote the script for Peaky Blinders, Murphy was not who he had in mind. Knight envisioned Tommy as a larger man, bigger, more physically imposing, the kind of gangster who fills a doorway. Murphy is 5'7" and weighs about 150 pounds soaking wet. He does not fill doorways. He slips through them. Murphy read the script and wanted the role badly enough to audition multiple times. He originally read for the part of Tommy, but was offered the role of Arthur instead, the older, louder, more volatile brother. Murphy turned it down. He didn't want Arthur. He wanted Tommy, which is honestly kind of insane when you think about it, turning down a guaranteed role on a show because you're holding out for a different one. But he went back. He auditioned again, and somewhere between the second and third reading, Knight saw something that changed his entire vision of the character. What Knight saw was stillness. Murphy has the ability rare among actors, almost non-existent among actors in crime dramas, to communicate power through silence. He doesn't need to shout. He doesn't need to throw punches. He can sit in a chair, look at someone, and make that person feel like the room has gotten smaller. Knight realized that this was a more interesting kind of gangster than the one he had originally imagined. Not the man who fills the doorway, the man who makes you afraid to walk through it. That recasting, going from big scary guy to quiet scary guy, changed the whole show. If Tommy had been a large man with a loud voice, Peaky Blinders would have been another gangster drama about muscle and territory. Because Tommy is small and quiet, the show became something else entirely. A gangster drama about being the smartest person in the room and making sure everyone knows it without ever raising your voice. Murphy has talked about how he prepared for the role in ways that went beyond normal character research. He lost weight. He changed the way he walked. Tommy's walk is specific, a kind of controlled prowl that communicates purpose and menace simultaneously. He smoked herbal cigarettes on camera, roughly 1,000 of them per season, by some estimates, which is just an absurd number of fake cigarettes for any human being to consume. He adopted Tommy's Birmingham accent so thoroughly that his own children once asked him why he sounded different at home. The accent, by the way, was a significant challenge. Murphy is Irish. The Birmingham accent is one of the most difficult and least prestigious accents in England. It's often mocked, rarely heard on prestige television, and even harder for a non-English speaker to master. Murphy worked with dialect coaches for months before filming began. By the time cameras rolled, the accent was flawless. But it took effort that most viewers will never appreciate because the whole point of good accent work is that you don't notice it. There's a specific physical choice Murphy makes as Tommy that I want to highlight because I think it's one of the most underrated pieces of acting in modern television. Tommy Shelby rarely blinks. Watch any scene where Tommy is negotiating, threatening, or being threatened. His eyes stay open, steady, unblinking. It creates an effect that is difficult to describe but impossible to miss. You feel like you're being watched by something that is not entirely human. A predator assessing prey, Murphy has confirmed that the non-blinking is a conscious choice. He practices holding his eyes open for extended periods. It's uncomfortable, it's unnatural, and it works because human beings are biologically programmed to feel uneasy when someone doesn't blink. We blink every 3 to 4 seconds. Tommy doesn't. And that absence, that tiny physical absence, creates a presence that fills the screen. Now, let me talk about Tommy's arc across 6 seasons because I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think it's one of the most carefully structured character journeys in modern television. And the key to understanding it is a single word that Stephen Knight has used repeatedly when discussing the show: trauma. Tommy Shelby returns from World War I broken. Not visibly, he walks. He talks. He functions. But he is broken in the way that men in 1919 were broken, which is to say, internally, silently, in a way that nobody around him has the language to describe. The word PTSD didn't exist in 1919. Shell shock was barely understood. Men came home from the trenches and were expected to simply resume their lives, as though 4 years of watching friends die in mud was an experience you could put down like a suitcase. Tommy can't put it down. Nobody on this show can. Arthur can't. John can't. Danny Whizbang, the friend who has episodes where he thinks he's still in France, can't. And this is what makes Peaky Blinders different from other gangster dramas. The violence in this show is not aspirational. It's symptomatic. Tommy doesn't become a gangster because he wants power. He becomes a gangster because the war taught him that violence is the only language the world respects. And if the world is going to be violent regardless, he might as well be the one holding the razor blade. I want to pause on Danny Whizbang for a moment because he's a minor character who tells a major story. Danny appears in a handful of episodes. He's a veteran who suffers from what we would now call severe PTSD. He has flashbacks where he believes he's still in the trenches. He becomes violent. He's a danger to himself and others. In 1919, the only treatment available to men like Danny was being locked in an asylum. Tommy refuses to let that happen. He protects Danny. He makes accommodations. He treats Danny's condition as a wound, not a weakness. This is significant because it tells you something about Tommy's own relationship with his trauma. Tommy never has the kind of visible breakdown that Danny has. He doesn't hallucinate. He doesn't lose control in public. But his symptoms are everywhere: the insomnia, the drinking, the emotional flatness, the inability to trust, the compulsive need for control. Tommy has the same wound as Danny. He just hides it better. And the show understands that hidden trauma is not healed trauma. It's just trauma that's learned to wear a suit and show up for work. The tunnels. Before the war, Tommy worked as a clay cutter in the tunnels beneath Birmingham. During the war, he was a tunneler, a soldier who dug tunnels under enemy lines and packed them with explosives. This is not a coincidence in the writing. Knight deliberately connects Tommy's pre-war life to his wartime experience. The tunnels are both literal and metaphorical. Tommy is always underground, always digging, always moving through darkness towards something that might explode. The imagery runs through the entire series. When Tommy is planning, he looks like a man digging a tunnel. When he's executing a plan, the tension feels like walking through a mine shaft with lit dynamite at the other end. The show never shows you the war directly. There are brief flashback fragments, explosions, mud, bodies. But Knight deliberately avoids extended combat sequences. The war exists in the show the way it exists in the characters' minds, as an absence, a black hole that everything orbits, but that nobody can look at directly. The characters talk around it, they reference it obliquely. They drink because of it, and fight because of it, and can't sleep because of it. But they never describe it, because men who have experienced that kind of trauma don't describe it. They live inside it. And Knight, whose grandfather fought in World War I and reportedly never spoke about it, understood this instinctively. The opium. Tommy uses opium throughout the series. It's his self-medication, the substance that quiets the noise in his head long enough for him to function. Knight doesn't moralize about it. He doesn't present Tommy's drug use as a character flaw that needs correcting. He presents it as a symptom of an injury that 1,919 had no treatment for. Tommy smokes opium the way a diabetic takes insulin, not because he wants to, but because the alternative is worse. The show treats addiction with a nuance that most dramas don't attempt understanding it as a response to pain rather than a cause of it. That's the thesis of the show. Every business deal, every murder, every political maneuver Tommy makes is an extension of the same survival instinct he developed in the tunnels of France. He is not building an empire. He is building a trench, a fortified position from which he can see the enemy coming. The difference between Tommy Shelby and a legitimate businessman is not ambition or intelligence. Tommy has more of both than any character in the show. The difference is that Tommy operates from a position of permanent threat. He wakes up every morning expecting to die. And that expectation, that bone-deep certainty that the world is coming for him, makes him both the most effective criminal in Birmingham and the most miserable human being in Birmingham, often in the same scene. Season 1 establishes Tommy as a local bookmaker who is smarter than everyone around him. The plot involves a stolen shipment of guns, the IRA, and Inspector Chester Campbell, a Belfast lawman sent to Birmingham to recover the weapons and clean up the city. Campbell is played by Sam Neill, and the dynamic between Neill's righteous, scripture-quoting policeman and Murphy's quiet, calculating gangster sets the template for every season that follows. Tommy versus an antagonist who represents a different kind of power, a different kind of authority, a different version of the world that Tommy is simultaneously resisting and absorbing. And here's something about season 1 that I think gets lost in discussions of the shows later. Bigger seasons. Season 1 is small, deliberately, beautifully small. The world is Birmingham. The stakes are local. The power Tommy is fighting for is the power to control a few streets, a few betting shops, a few alliances with local criminals. The show starts in a specific neighborhood and expands outward season by season. like a stone dropped in a pond, each ring of ripples wider than the last. By season 5, Tommy is in Parliament dealing with fascists and aristocrats. But in season 1, he's arguing with his aunt about how to run a gambling operation. The intimacy of those early episodes is part of what makes the show work. You care about Tommy's rise because you remember how small he started. Grace Burgess, the undercover agent sent by Campbell to infiltrate Tommy's operation, represents the first time the show puts Tommy's emotional armor to the test. Grace is played by Annabelle Wallace, and the love story between her and Tommy is the show's first attempt at something the genre rarely does. Well, genuine romance inside a crime narrative. Most gangster stories treat love interests as accessories. Peaky Blinders treats Grace as Tommy's weakness, not because she's helpless. She's a spy. She's trained. She's dangerous in her own right, but because loving her forces Tommy to be vulnerable. And vulnerability, for a man whose entire identity is built on never being vulnerable, is terrifying. Grace's death in season 3, shot at a charity gala by an assassin targeting Tommy, is a turning point that I think the show never fully recovers from creatively. And I say this as someone who deeply admires the show. Grace's death removes the last emotional anchor Tommy has. After Grace, Tommy stops trying to be happy. He stops even pretending. He marries Lizzie. He has children. He goes through the motions of domestic life. But the light that Grace brought, the possibility that Tommy could be something other than a gangster, dies with her, and the show becomes darker, heavier, more relentless from that point forward. Whether that's a strength or a limitation depends on what you want from the series. Some viewers prefer the later, bleaker seasons. Others miss the balance that Grace provided. Season 2 brings Tom Hardy's Alfie Solomons, a Jewish gangster from Camden Town who is equal parts terrifying and hilarious. Hardy's performance is so eccentric, so physically committed, so genuinely unpredictable that he threatens to steal the show every time he appears on screen. And I think the Tommy-Alfie dynamic is the most fascinating relationship in the entire series, because they are the same person viewed from two different angles. Both are traumatized. Both are violent. Both use intelligence as a weapon. But Tommy suppresses his humanity behind a mask of control, while Alfie lets his humanity leak out in every direction through jokes, through monologues, through sudden eruptions of violence that seem to surprise even him. Tommy is ice. Alfie is fire. And when they share a scene, the temperature in the room becomes genuinely dangerous. Hardy reportedly improvised extensively in the role. Knight wrote Alfie's dialogue, but Hardy would frequently go off script, adding words, changing rhythms, inserting physical business that wasn't planned. Knight has said he eventually stopped trying to control Hardy's improvisations and started writing toward them, anticipating where Hardy would take the character and leaving room in the script for it. That's a specific kind of creative trust that most showrunners don't extend to their actors. And it produced one of the most memorable characters in British television. I want to spend more time on Alfie because I think Hardy's process for creating the character is genuinely fascinating, and it tells you something about how the best performances in Peaky Blinders emerged from collision rather than collaboration. Hardy created Alfie's voice from scratch. It's not a standard London accent. It's not Cockney. It's not any recognizable dialect. It's something Hardy assembled from pieces part East London Jewish community speech patterns he researched, part his own invention, par pure instinct. The voice is thick, gravelly, unpredictable. Alfie starts sentences in one direction and finishes them in another. He interrupts himself. He trails off. He mumbles. And then, suddenly, he's perfectly clear, delivering a threat so precise and so calm that the room temperature drops. Hardy also made physical choices that weren't in the script. The way Alfie stands wide, grounded, like a man who expects to be hit at any moment. The way he uses his hands, gesturing constantly, pointing, waving, conducting his own monologues, like a man directing an invisible orchestra. The way he eats, Hardy insisted on eating during scenes. Alfie is always chewing something bread, fruit, cake. And once someone pointed this out to me, I couldn't stop noticing it. It's a dominance display. A man who eats while threatening you is a man who does not consider you a threat. The food is Alfie saying you're not important enough to make me stop eating. And then there's Alfie's death in season 4. Or rather, his death. Tommy shoots Alfie on a beach in Margate. Alfie has cancer. He's dying anyway. He asks Tommy to kill him, a mercy killing disguised as a business transaction. The scene is devastating because it's the only moment in the show where Tommy and Alfie are completely honest with each other. No games, no manipulation. Just two men who respect each other standing on a beach. And one of them asking the other to pull the trigger. And then season 5 brings him back. Alfie survived the gunshot. He's scarred. He's diminished. But he's alive. And fans went absolutely insane. Alfie's return was the most celebrated moment of season 5. Not because it was surprising Hardy's involvement had been rumored, but because the audience genuinely missed him. They missed the energy. They missed the chaos. They missed the monologues about bread and God and the fundamental unfairness of the universe delivered in a voice that sounds like gravel being dragged through honey. Murphy and Hardy's off-screen friendship has become part of Peaky Blinders lore. They genuinely enjoy working together. The scenes between Tommy and Alfie have an electricity that comes from two actors who trust each other completely, who know that whatever one of them does, the other will match it. When Hardy goes big, Murphy goes still. When Murphy goes cold, Hardy goes hot. They are perfectly complementary opposites. And the balance between them produces scenes that feel less like scripted television and more like jazz. Two musicians improvising around each other. Finding the rhythm in real time, season 3 introduces Paddy Considine as Father John Hughes, a corrupt priest involved in fascist politics. And season 4 brings Adrian Brody as Luca Changretta, an Italian-American gangster seeking revenge for Tommy's killing of his family member. Each villain represents something Tommy must overcome, not physically, but psychologically. Campbell is the law. Alfie is House. Hughes is corruption disguised as faith. Changretta is consequence, the inevitable result of the violence Tommy has been using as a tool for 3 seasons, catching up with him. Season 5 escalates into politics. Tommy is now a member of parliament. He is wealthy, powerful, connected. He has everything he ever wanted, and he is more miserable than he has ever been. The show does something very brave here. It shows you that getting what you want doesn't fix anything. Tommy wanted security. He got it. The security didn't make the nightmares stop. He wanted power. He got it. The power didn't make the memories of France go away. He wanted to build something legitimate. He built it. And the legitimacy feels like another costume, another mask, another layer of armor over a wound that refuses to heal. Oswald Mosley, played by Sam Claflin, is the season 5 villain, and he's the most interesting antagonist in the series for a specific reason. Mosley is based on the real Sir Oswald Mosley, who founded the British Union of Fascists in 1932. Claflin plays him with a combination of charm and menace that makes fascism feel seductive rather than cartoonish, which is, historically, exactly how it worked. Fascism didn't succeed because its leaders were obviously evil. It succeeded because they were charismatic, because they told people what they wanted to hear, because they took real grievances, unemployment, poverty, the sense that the world was leaving working people behind and weaponized them. Tommy recognizes Mosley as dangerous, precisely because Tommy uses the same techniques. They both manipulate, they both perform. They both understand that power is not about force, it's about narrative. You control the story. You control the people. The difference between Tommy and Mosley is not method, but goal. Tommy wants to protect his family. Mosley wants to reshape the country. And the terrifying thing is that the skills required for both are identical. The season 5 finale, Tommy, standing in a field with a gun pressed against his own temple, is the show's most devastating image. Not because it's shocking, because it's earned. 5 seasons of accumulated damage. 5 seasons of deaths and betrayals and victories that taste like ash. 5 seasons of a man performing strength while crumbling from the inside. And then one moment where the performance stops and all that's left is a man who doesn't want to be alive anymore. Murphy has talked about filming that scene with characteristic understatement. He said it was difficult. He said he had to go somewhere emotionally that he hadn't gone before. What he didn't say, what the scene says for him, is that Tommy Shelby's suicidal moment is not an aberration. It's a destination. The entire show has been building toward it. Every drink, every cigarette, every nightmare. Every time Tommy stares into the canal and sees nothing looking back, it was all heading here. The gun in the field is not a surprise. It's an arrival. Season 6 was supposed to be different. Stephen Knight had planned for the final season to feature Tommy's redemption, a transformation from nihilistic gangster to something approximating a good man. I want to take him on that journey from the person we saw in season 1 to the person he will become in 1939. Knight said in 2019, the plan was for the show to end as World War II begins, with Tommy finally finding purpose that isn't rooted in violence. And then Helen McCrory died. I want to spend real time on this because I think Helen McCrory's death is not just a tragedy, it's a creative inflection point that fundamentally altered the show's final chapter. McCrory played Aunt Polly, the matriarch, the conscience, the only person in the Shelby family who could look Tommy in the eye and tell him he was wrong. Polly was the show's moral center. Not because she was moral, she killed people. She lied, she manipulated, but because she understood the cost, every other character treats violence as a means to an end. Polly understands that violence is also the end, that it eats you from the inside, that every person you destroy takes a piece of you with them. McCrory brought something to Polly that no other actor could have replicated, a combination of ferocity and fragility that made the character feel genuinely dangerous and genuinely wounded at the same time. She could deliver a threat with the same quiet intensity that Murphy brings to Tommy, and then show you the grief underneath, the tenderness beneath the steel. McCrory didn't play Polly as a tough woman. She played her as a hurt woman who learned to be tough because nobody else was going to protect her family. That distinction is everything. There's a scene in season 2 where Polly describes what happened to her children taken from her years ago by the authorities, simply because she was poor and unmarried. McCrory plays the scene with a controlled fury that makes the air around her feel combustible. She is not crying. She is not shouting. She is speaking in a low, steady voice that is somehow more terrifying than any shout could be. The scene tells you everything about Polly, the loss, the rage, the years of compacted grief that she carries like a stone in her chest. McCrory does this in about 90 seconds of screen time. It is one of the finest pieces of acting in the entire series. McCrory also understood something about Polly's relationship to power that I think is easy to miss. Polly is the only character in the show who had power before the war. While Tommy and Arthur were in France, Polly ran the business. She kept the family alive. She made the decisions. And when the boys came back and took over, when Tommy assumed control and Polly was relegated to advisor, there was a loss there that the show never fully articulates, but that McCrory communicated in every scene. The slight tightening of the jaw when Tommy makes a decision without consulting her. The way she looks at Arthur with a mix of pity and frustration. The way she performs deference to Tommy while radiating the knowledge that she was doing this job before he was old enough to shave. McCrory played the politics of gender in a patriarchal family with a subtlety that most shows wouldn't even attempt. McCrory died of cancer on April 16. Leontien Ling Archer E. At the age of 52. Her husband, Damian Lewis, announced her death with words that could have been written about Polly herself. She died as she lived, fearlessly. Her death forced Knight to rewrite season 6 from the ground up. Polly was supposed to be central to the final season. With McCrory gone, Knight had to reimagine the entire story. The first episode of season 6 is dedicated to McCrory's memory. The closing credits end with silence, no music, no Nick Cave, no dramatic score, just silence. For a show that uses music the way other shows use dialogue, the silence is the loudest statement it has ever made. Polly's death is written into the show as an off-screen event. She is killed by the IRA between seasons. Tommy spirals. Arthur breaks. The family fractures. And the audience watches a show mourn one of its own, not just the character, but the actor. Not just the story, but the person who made the story possible. Cillian Murphy said at the time, Helen was a beautiful, caring, funny, compassionate human being. She was also a consummate actress, and she really loved being Polly. She was the beating heart of the show. Knight described the loss as a tragedy and said, after she'd gone, we knew she wanted this thing to continue, and we hope we have continued in a respectful and appropriate way. The season 6 premiere reviewer for The Independent wrote that McCrory's absence leaves a chasm. They were right. You can write around an absence. You can't fill it. Let me go back to Murphy for a moment, because I think there are aspects of his physical transformation for the role that don't get enough attention. Murphy lost significant weight for every season. Tommy Shelby is gaunt. His cheekbones are prominent. His eyes look slightly sunken. This is not makeup. This is an actor who deliberately became thinner than his natural body to create a specific visual effect. Murphy has talked about the diet restrictions he maintained during filming, eating less, monitoring his weight, staying at a level of thinness that made him look hungry. Not starving, hungry. There's a difference. Starving is desperation. Hungry is intention. Tommy looks like a man who is always slightly unsatisfied, always wanting something that he can't quite reach. That physical hunger mirrors the psychological hunger. The body tells the story that the dialogue doesn't. The eyes, Murphy's eyes, are the most famous element of his performance. And there's a reason for that. They are an unusually pale shade of blue, almost translucent in certain lighting conditions. The show's cinematographers have talked about how they light Murphy's face specifically to enhance this effect using cool, side-lit angles that make his eyes glow against the dark backgrounds of the Birmingham sets. The result is a face that seems to be generating its own light source. Tommy's eyes don't reflect the world around him. They project something outward, something cold, something calculating. When Tommy looks at you, you feel assessed, not seen, assessed, like a piece on a chessboard being evaluated for its usefulness. The show's visual style deserves its own discussion because it's one of the most distinctive aesthetics in modern television. Peaky Blinders looks like nothing else on TV. The color palette is desaturated blues, grays, blacks, with occasional bursts of warm light in the pub scenes and the domestic moments. The camera work is deliberate and controlled, with slow tracking shots that follow Tommy through rooms and corridors. The editing uses slow motion frequently, particularly during moments of violence or emotional intensity, which gives the show a rhythm that feels more like a music video than a traditional drama. Director Colm McCarthy, who directed the first 2 episodes and established the show's visual language, has talked about the influences behind the look. He cited Westerns, particularly Sergio Leone's spaghetti Westerns, as a primary visual reference. Tommy Shelby walks down the streets of Birmingham the way Clint Eastwood walks down the streets of a frontier town. The framing, the pacing, the use of wide shots to establish environment and close-ups to establish character. It's all borrowed from a genre that Peaky Blinders has no apparent connection to. And yet it works. Because the essence of a Western is the same as the essence of Peaky Blinders, a man with a code operating in a lawless world, using violence to impose order on chaos. The opening credits sequence Tommy walking through the streets of Small Heath, the industrial skyline of Birmingham looming behind him. Nick Cave's Red Right Hand building on the soundtrack is one of the most effective title sequences on television. It establishes three things in 60 seconds. The setting, industrial, working class. Dart. The character, alone, purposeful, dangerous. And the tone, atmospheric, musical, slightly mythological. The opening credits are a promise. They tell you what kind of show you're about to watch. And the show keeps that promise every single episode. I want to talk about one more thematic element before we move to the history, because I think it's the thread that runs through the entire show and that most analysis misses. Peaky Blinders is not a show about crime. It's a show about class. Every conflict in the series is, at its root, a class conflict. Tommy versus Campbell, working class criminal versus establishment authority. Tommy versus the Italians and the Jews. Different ethnic communities competing for the same economic space at the bottom of the social hierarchy. Tommy versus Father Hughes and the aristocrats, the working class encountering the ruling class and discovering that the rulers are more corrupt than anyone on the streets. Tommy versus Mosley, a working class man confronting an aristocrat who weaponizes working class anger for his own political gain. Knight has been explicit about this. He grew up in working class Birmingham. He watched the decline of British manufacturing. He saw communities destroyed by economic policies made by people who had never visited those communities. And he put all of that into Peaky Blinders, not as a political lecture, but as a story about a family that refuses to accept the place that society has assigned them. The Shelbys are criminals. They are also the only people in the show who look at the class system and say no. Not through protest, not through politics, through force. They take what the system won't give them. And the show asks you to understand, not to approve, but to understand why someone in their position might make that choice. The gin, Tommy drinks gin, not whiskey, which would be the expected choice for an Irish Romani gangster in 1920s Birmingham. Gin. This is a deliberate character choice by Knight. In 1920 England, gin was associated with the upper classes. It was a drink of refinement, of social aspiration. Tommy drinks gin because he's performing class. He's adopting the habits of the people he's fighting against. Every time Tommy orders a gin, he's saying, without saying, that he belongs in rooms where people like him are not supposed to be. The drink is a costume, like the suit, like the accent he modifies when speaking to different social classes, like everything about Tommy Shelby. The gin is simultaneously authentic and performed, real and theatrical, true and false at the same time. Now, let me talk about the real Peaky Blinders. The real Peaky Blinders were a street gang based in Birmingham, England, in the 1890s. Not the 1920s, the 1890s. The show moves the timeline forward by about 30 years, placing the gang in the aftermath of World War I, which gives Stephen Knight the thematic foundation he needs: the war, the trauma, the social upheaval. But historically, the actual Peaky Blinders were active a generation earlier. There's also a class dimension to the real Peaky Blinders that Knight captures beautifully. These were not mafia dons in tailored suits. These were working class boys from industrial slums, the children of factory workers, coal miners, and blacksmiths. They became criminals not because they were inherently violent, but because the legitimate economy of late Victorian Birmingham offered them nothing. The factories paid starvation wages. The schools were inadequate. The police were corrupt. And into that vacuum, that space between poverty and ambition gangs, emerged as alternative economies run by people the legitimate economy rejected. Knight comes from this world, not the criminal part. His family were not gangsters, but the working class Birmingham part. He grew up in the same neighborhoods, heard the same accents, understood the same codes. When he writes dialogue for Tommy Shelby, he's not imagining how a Birmingham gangster would talk. He's remembering how Birmingham sounds. The authenticity of the show doesn't come from research. It comes from memory. And memory, like folklore, is more honest than fact, even when it's less accurate. The real Peaky Blinders were eventually displaced by larger, more organized gangs, particularly the Birmingham Boys, led by Billy Kimber. Kimber appears in season 1 of the show, played by Charlie Creed Miles. In reality, the Birmingham Boys were far more powerful than the Peaky Blinders ever were. Knight reversed this dynamic for the show, making the Shelbys dominant and Kimber the rival. It's a dramatic choice that serves the narrative, even if it inverts history. History records what happened. Storytelling decides what matters. They were bookmakers and racketeers. Small-time criminals who controlled illegal gambling operations, ran protection rackets, and engaged in the kind of street-level violence that was common in working-class neighborhoods in industrial England. They were not the vast criminal empire that the show depicts. They were local. They were territorial. They were, by the standards of organized crime, fairly modest. The name, everyone asks about the name. Peaky almost certainly refers to the peaked flat caps they wore, the signature headwear of working-class Birmingham. Blinder was slang for someone who was sharply dressed. So Peaky Blinder roughly translates to well-dressed person in a peaked cap, which is considerably less intimidating than what the show suggests. And then there are the razor blades. Everyone asks about the razor blades. The show's most iconic detail razor blades, sewn into the peaks of their caps to slash enemies' eyes, is almost certainly made up. I know. I was disappointed too. Historian Carl Chin, the foremost authority on Birmingham's criminal history, has repeatedly stated that razor blades were luxury items in the 1890s. Working-class street gangs could not afford them. The The weapons the real Peaky Blinders used were considerably more practical belts, boots, bricks, whatever was available. The razor blade legend likely originated decades after the gang had disbanded, growing more dramatic with each retelling the way urban legends always do. Stephen Knight knows this. He's been transparent about the fact that the show is inspired by history rather than constrained by it. He calls it the smoky space, in between fact and fiction, a place where real events provide the foundation and imagination builds the house. Knight's parents grew up in Birmingham during a period when stories about the Peaky Blinders were still circulating as local legend. His grandmother knew people who knew the real gang members. The stories Knight heard as a child exaggerated, embellished, mythologized across generations, became the raw material for the show. And I think this is actually more interesting than straight historical adaptation. Knight isn't telling you what happened. He's telling you what the stories sounded like when people told them to each other in pubs and living rooms across Birmingham for decades. The show is not history. It's folklore. And folklore, by definition, is history processed through emotion, events filtered through the feelings of the people who experienced them until the truth and the telling become inseparable. The real Sheldons, a family that ran an underground horse betting operation in Birmingham, are the primary inspiration for the Shelby family. Knight has confirmed this connection. The Sheldons were real. Their business was real. Their reputation in the community was real. And the transition from the Sheldons to the Shelbys, from historical bookmakers to fictional crime lords, follows the same pattern that mythology has always followed. Real people become stories. Stories become legends. Legends become shows on BBC Two that get watched by 10 million people and inspire men worldwide to buy flat caps they don't know how to wear. Now, I want to talk about the music, because the soundtrack of Peaky Blinders is one of the most audacious, creative decisions in television history, and I think it deserves its own discussion. The show is set in the 1920s and 1930s. The music is from the 2000s and 2010s. Nick Cave, PJ Harvey, Arctic Monkeys, Radiohead, Jack White. The soundtrack is aggressively, deliberately anachronistic. It makes no attempt to sound period appropriate. And it works. And on the soundtrack, PJ Harvey's To Bring You My Love begins low, grinding, almost subterranean. The song builds as Tommy walks. The camera holds on him from behind. He doesn't look back. And the song becomes Tommy's internal monologue rendered as music. He has no dialogue. He doesn't need any. Harvey is saying what Tommy can't. The show also uses silence in ways that most music-heavy dramas don't. There are scenes, particularly in the later seasons, where the music drops out entirely, and all you hear is Tommy's breathing, the creak of a chair, the clink of a glass. These silences are as deliberate as the music. They represent the moments where Tommy's armor drops, where the man behind the myth sits alone in a room and listens to the nothing that lives inside him. Knight has said he writes scenes with specific songs in mind. He'll put on Nick Cave or PJ Harvey and write the scene to the rhythm. The music isn't added in post-production. it's baked into the writing process. The music came first, the dialogue came second. That's backwards from how most television works. And it's why Peaky Blinders sounds the way it does. Not like a show with good music, but like music that happens to have a show attached to it. It works so well that most viewers stop noticing the anachronism after the first episode and simply accept that Tommy Shelby's world sounds like a Nick Cave album. Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds is the show's signature song, its theme, its anthem, its sonic identity. The song was released in 1994. It is about a mysterious, threatening figure who moves through the world, dispensing judgment and fear. It is not about a 1920s Birmingham gangster, but it sounds like it is. The dark, grinding, menacing quality of the song, the way it builds without ever quite resolving, the way Cave's voice drops to a whisper and then rises to a growl matches the show's tone so perfectly that it retroactively feels like it was written for Tommy Shelby. It wasn't, but the best creative choices often feel inevitable in retrospect. Knight has talked about the decision to use contemporary music instead of period-appropriate jazz and music hall songs. His reasoning was straightforward. Period music creates distance. It reminds you that you're watching something from 100 years ago. It makes the characters feel foreign, historical, safely removed from your own experience. Contemporary music eliminates that distance. It makes the characters feel present, alive, dangerous in a way that feels current rather than nostalgic. When Arctic Monkeys plays over a scene of Tommy walking through the streets of Birmingham, the show is telling you, this is not the past. This is now. These people are not historical relics. They are your contemporaries. I think this is one of the smartest creative decisions any showrunner has ever made. And it connects to something deeper about what Peaky Blinders is actually doing with its period setting. The show is not interested in the 1920s as a historical moment. It's interested in the 1920s as a mirror for the present class division, political corruption, the exploitation of veterans, the rise of fascism, the gap between the people who make the decisions and the people who suffer the consequences. These are not 1920s problems. They are permanent problems. And by scoring them with contemporary music, Knight removes the cushion of historical distance and forces you to see the parallels. The music also serves a specific character function. Tommy's scenes are often scored with darker, heavier tracks. Nick Cave, P.J. Harvey, Anna Calvi. Arthur's scenes tend toward more chaotic, aggressive music. Grace, Tommy's first wife, is associated with Irish folk music, which connects her to Tommy's emotional interior in a way that the contemporary rock doesn't. The soundtrack is not random. It's curated character by character, scene by scene. To reinforce what the writing is doing, Knight builds playlists the way some writers build character sheets. The music tells you who the person is before they say a word. Anna Calvi, who scored much of seasons 5 and 6, has talked about the process of writing music for Peaky Blinders. She described it as scoring the inside of Tommy's head, not the external action, but the internal state. The screaming guitars, the distorted feedback, the moments where the music sounds like it's breaking apart, that's Tommy's psyche translated into sound. The music is not background, it's diagnosis. There is one specific musical moment that I think is the best use of music in the entire series. And it happens in season 3. Tommy is walking through a field after a particularly devastating event. Everything has gone wrong. The plan has collapsed. People have died. Let me shift to the show's villains for a moment, because I think there's a structural pattern across the 6 seasons that I've never seen anyone lay out properly. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Each season of Peaky Blinders gives Tommy a new antagonist, and each antagonist represents a different form of power that Tommy must confront, not just defeat, but understand and, in some cases, absorb. Season 1, Inspector Campbell, the Law. Authority imposed from outside. The state's power to surveil, arrest, and punish. Tommy defeats Campbell not by fighting the law, but by outmaneuvering it. Season 2, Alfie Solomons plus Sabini, criminal power from a different community. The Italian mob. The Jewish mob. Tommy's world expands beyond Birmingham for the first time. He learns that his local empire is a small piece of a much larger game. Season 3, Father Hughes plus the Russian aristocrats, institutional power, the church, the state, old money, power that has been embedded in the structure of society for centuries. Tommy discovers that the people at the top are more corrupt than the people at the bottom. They just hide it better. Season 4, Luca Changretta, Consequence. The violence Tommy has used as a tool comes back to find him. Changretta is not a new kind of power. He is the old kind, the gangster. The vendetta, blood for blood. He represents the fact that you cannot use violence without eventually having violence used against you. Season 5, Oswald Mosley, political ideology. Fascism. The rise of a belief system that weaponizes the same working class resentment that Tommy himself exploited. Mosley is dangerous not because he has guns. Tommy has guns. Mosley is dangerous because he has ideas. And ideas, as Tommy learns, are harder to kill than people. Season 6, Michael Gray plus the IRA family. Betrayal from within. The people closest to you turning against you. After 5 seasons of external threats, the final threat comes from inside the house. This escalation from local law enforcement to global fascism, from physical threats to ideological ones, mirrors Tommy's own evolution. As Tommy grows more powerful, his enemies grow more abstract. He starts by fighting a policeman and ends by fighting an ideology. The show's villain structure tracks Tommy's transformation from street criminal to political player. And each villain teaches him something he needs for the next fight. Campbell teaches him strategy. Alfie teaches him that you can't trust anyone. Hughes teaches him that institutions are more dangerous than individuals. Changretta teaches him that the past always comes back. Mosley teaches him that the most dangerous enemy is the one who believes he's right. And by season 6, Tommy has absorbed all of these lessons. He is a master strategist. He trusts no one. He understands institutions. He respects consequences. He recognizes ideological threats. He is, by any objective measure, the most dangerous man in England. And he is also the most alone, because every lesson came with a cost. And the cost was always a person. Grace, John, Polly, Aber, Amma, Alfie. Each victory left Tommy with more power and fewer people. By the end, he has everything except the one thing that might have saved him: connection. That's the Peaky Blinders thesis. It's the same thesis as The Godfather, the same thesis as Breaking Bad, the same thesis as every story about a man who builds an empire and discovers that empires are just fancy words for cages. Power isolates, ambition alienates, and the man who wins everything loses the only things that matter. And while we're talking about the cost of violence, I want to spend a moment on Arthur, because Arthur Shelby is the character who absorbs the violence Tommy delegates. And Paul Anderson's performance across 6 seasons is one of the most physically committed pieces of acting in modern television. Arthur is the older brother. He's supposed to be in charge. He was first in line before Tommy came back from the war and quietly took over. And Arthur's arc is the story of a man who should have been king but lacks the temperament, the intelligence, and the emotional stability to hold the crown. He knows it. Tommy knows it. Everyone knows it. And that knowledge, the awareness that your younger brother is better at everything, defines Arthur's entire emotional world. Arthur is violent in a way that Tommy is not. Tommy uses violence strategically. It's a tool, deployed when necessary, contained when possible. Arthur uses violence because he can't stop. When Arthur fights, he doesn't stop at incapacitation. He continues. He loses himself in it. The violence becomes its own purpose, its own escape from the pain that drives it. Arthur is not a strategic fighter. He's a traumatized man who has found the one thing that makes the noise in his head go quiet, and that thing is making the other person go quiet first. Anderson played this with a physicality that was genuinely concerning to watch. His Arthur shakes, his hands tremble, his eyes move too fast. He looks like a man permanently on the edge of either violence or tears, and who doesn't know which one is coming until it arrives. The performance is exhausting. You feel tired after watching an Arthur scene, because Anderson puts so much physical energy into the character that it leaks through the screen. Arthur's attempted suicide in season 2, his walk to the noose. His decision to step off is one of the most quietly devastating scenes in the show. No music, no dramatic camera angles, just a man in a room making a decision and then unmaking it. Anderson said he drew on personal experiences for that scene. The performance has a specificity that generic acting doesn't produce. Arthur's pain feels lived, not performed. Lived. The relationship between Tommy and Arthur is the show's most important dynamic, more important than Tommy and Grace, more important than Tommy and Polly, more important than Tommy and any villain, because Arthur is the one person Tommy cannot control with intelligence. Arthur loves Tommy with an absolute, unconditional, slightly terrifying devotion that no amount of strategic thinking can manage. Arthur will do anything Tommy asks, and Tommy knows it. And the guilt of using that devotion, of sending his brother into violence over and over, knowing what it costs Arthur psychologically, is one of Tommy's heaviest burdens. He uses Arthur the way a general uses a weapon. And like all weapons, Arthur degrades with use. He breaks down. He drinks more. He prays more. He hurts more. And Tommy watches it happen and keeps using him anyway, because the alternative is doing the violence himself. And Tommy has decided that his hands need to stay clean, even if it means Arthur's hands never will. That is the darkest thing in Peaky Blinders. Not the murders, not the razor blades, not the fascists or the mobsters. The darkest thing is a brother knowingly destroying another brother's soul because the Empire requires it. Let me wind down with some of the smaller details. The things that the production team built into the show that most viewers never consciously notice, but that create the texture and atmosphere that makes Peaky Blinders feel like a living world rather than a television set. The flat caps. The show popularized the flat cap to an extent that the fashion industry still hasn't fully recovered from. After Peaky Blinders premiered, flat cap sales increased by over 70% in the UK. Men who had never worn hats in their lives started appearing in newsboy caps. The show didn't just reflect 1920s fashion, it revived it. 100 years after the style originated, a BBC drama made it cool again. Stephen Knight has said he finds this both flattering and slightly ridiculous. These are caps that my grandparents wore because they were poor. He's noted. Now they cost £40, which is honestly one of the funniest things about the show's legacy. It accidentally turned poverty into fashion. The cigarettes. Murphy smoked approximately 3,000 herbal cigarettes over the course of the series. They were not real tobacco. They were nicotine-free herbal substitutes. But they were real in terms of volume and physical impact. Murphy has talked about the toll the smoking took on his lungs and throat, particularly during long shooting days where Tommy appears in every scene. The cigarette became as much a part of Tommy's character as the accent or the walk, the way he holds it, the way he inhales, the way he uses it as punctuation in conversation. Tommy doesn't smoke because he's nervous. He smokes because it gives him something to do with the silence. The cigarette fills the pauses that other characters fill with words. The Birmingham accent. Knight made a deliberate decision to keep the accents authentic rather than softening them for international audiences. This was risky. The Birmingham accent is one of the least prestigious in England, often ranked in surveys as the least attractive English accent. British television had historically avoided it. Knight, who grew up in Birmingham, saw this as a form of cultural erasure and insisted that his characters sound like real people from real neighborhoods. The success of the show, particularly internationally, where the accent was simply accepted as English rather than regionally specific, vindicated the decision. Murphy, an Irishman playing a Brummie, became the most famous Birmingham accent in the world. Knight considers this one of the show's most important achievements. The set design. The Garrison pub, the Shelby family's headquarters, was built as a complete, functional set that could be filmed from any angle. Most television pubs are facades, a bar, a few tables, a backdrop. The Garrison was a room. It had walls, floors, ceilings, working light fixtures, real drinks behind the bar. The production team could place the camera anywhere and find something authentic to film. That kind of set construction is expensive and unusual for television. It's more common in film. Knight insisted on it because he wanted the actors to feel like they were in a real place, not standing on a set. And the difference is visible when Tommy walks into the Garrison. He walks into a room, not onto a stage. The door has weight. The bar has texture. The light comes from real sources. You can almost smell the beer and the smoke. The show's use of slow motion is deliberate and consistent. Slow motion in Peaky Blinders is not used for action. It's used for arrival. Tommy arriving at a location. Tommy walking through a crowd. Tommy entering a room. The slow motion doesn't make the action look cool. It makes the character look mythological. Tommy Shelby in slow motion looks less like a gangster and more like a figure from folklore, a spirit walking through the mortal world, slightly out of sync with the people around him. The technique converts a small-time Birmingham criminal into something that feels ancient and inevitable. And it does this without dialogue, without exposition, without anyone telling you that Tommy is important. The camera tells you, the tempo tells you, the music tells you, and by the time Tommy opens his mouth, you already believe him. Snoop Dogg is a fan. A.P. Rocky is a fan. David Beckham is a fan. The show's influence reached corners of popular culture that a BBC Two drama about 1920s Birmingham has no business reaching. Knight has told a story about meeting a scaffolder in Birmingham who pulled up his trouser leg to reveal a tattoo of Tommy Shelby on his calf. That's when I realized what we'd done. Knight said, when a working-class bloke in Birmingham gets a tattoo of a fictional character from his own city that's not just television, that's identity. The cultural impact in Birmingham specifically is worth examining. The city embraced the show in a way that transcended normal fan behavior. Pubs were redesigned to look like the Garrison. Tour companies offer Peaky Blinders walking tours through the streets of Small Heath and Digbeth. The Bullring, Birmingham's main shopping center, has hosted Peaky Blinders exhibitions. A tram was named after Stephen Knight. The city found itself in the show, and the show found itself in the city. For a place that had spent decades being the punchline of British regional jokes, Birmingham, it's not that bad. Actually, Peaky Blinders was validation. Proof that working-class stories from industrial cities could be glamorous, dramatic, and globally successful. By order of the Peaky Blinders, 5 words, the show's catchphrase. The line Tommy delivers when the conversation is over and the decision has been made, it functions in the show as an authority declaration. Outside the show, it became something else entirely. The phrase became a global meme. T-shirts, coffee mugs, phone cases, tattoos. People who have never watched a single episode know the phrase. It entered the cultural vocabulary the way "I'll make him an offer he can't refuse" did, as shorthand for confident, slightly menacing authority. Office workers use it in emails as a joke. Football fans chant it at matches. It has been printed on wedding invitations, birthday cakes, and in at least one documented case, a judge's chamber door in Brazil. What makes the phrase work is what it doesn't say. It doesn't specify what happens if you disobey. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't explain. It simply states that a decision has been made by people who do not need to justify their decisions. The ambiguity is the threat. The silence after the phrase is where the violence lives. Tommy doesn't tell you what happens next. Your imagination does that for him. And your imagination is always worse than reality. And since we're talking about cultural legacy, let me talk about season 6's final image. Because it's one of the most carefully constructed closing shots in television. Tommy burns his caravan. He burns his possessions. He lets the world believe he's dead. And then he rides away on a white horse. This matters. In season 1, Tommy's first appearance is on a black horse, riding through a small heath while residents flee indoors. 6 seasons later, the final image is the inverse, a solitary figure on a white horse, riding away from everything. Black horse to white horse. Arrival to departure. Death to rebirth. The show's visual bookend is a complete reversal of its opening image. Night confirmed this was intentional, the color of the horse, the direction of travel, the solitude. Tommy enters Birmingham as a predator and leaves it as what? A ghost? A freed man? The show doesn't tell you. It just shows you the horse and lets you decide. The burning of the caravan is equally significant. In Romani culture, the deceased's possessions are burned after death. Tommy is not dead, but he is performing his own funeral, staging a death for the version of himself that existed for 6 seasons. The Thomas Shelby who ran the Peaky Blinders, who sat in Parliament, who killed and schemed, that man is dead. Whoever rides away on the white horse is someone new, someone whose story the show does not need to tell, because the point is not who Tommy becomes. The point is that he becomes. That is the show's final gift to a character who spent 6 seasons trapped by his own success. It gives him the one thing he never had, an exit. Not death, not defeat, just a man on a horse, riding toward a horizon, with nothing behind him and everything ahead. The show also had a measurable impact on tourism. Birmingham saw significant increases in visitor numbers after the show premiered, with tourists coming specifically to visit, filming locations, and experience the world the show depicted. This is unusual for a show set in a period that no living person remembers. You can't visit the 1920s Birmingham of Peaky Blinders because it doesn't exist anymore. But people came anyway. They walked the streets. They drank in the pubs. They bought flat caps. They took photographs in front of industrial buildings that had been converted into apartment complexes and coffee shops. The Birmingham they visited was not the Birmingham of the show. but the feeling was close enough. There's a Romani dimension to the show that I think deserves more attention than it typically receives. The Shelby family is Romani Irish traveler heritage. To be specific, Tommy's mother was Romani. The family practices certain Romani customs, the burning of possessions after death, the significance of horses, the use of specific phrases and rituals. Knight has been careful to include these elements respectfully, consulting with Romani community members during the writing process. The Romani identity is not incidental to the Shelbys, it's central. Their outsider status in Birmingham society, the fact that they are not fully accepted by the settled community, the fact that they occupy a space between respectability and marginality is directly connected to their Romani heritage. Tommy's strategic genius is partly a function of this outsider perspective. He sees the social structure of 1920s England from the outside, which means he sees its weaknesses. He exploits those weaknesses not just for profit, but for survival. The Romani identity makes the Shelbys simultaneously insiders. They live in Birmingham. They run businesses. They know the community and outsiders. They are never fully trusted, never fully accepted, always slightly apart. That dual identity, belonging and not belonging at the same time, is the engine of the show. The horses. I want to come back to the horses because there's one more thing about them that I think is worth saying. In Romani culture, horses are not pets. They are not assets. They are family. They are companions. They are the physical manifestation of freedom, the ability to move, to travel, to leave when staying becomes dangerous. Tommy's relationship with horses, the way he touches them, the way he speaks to them, the calm that comes over him in their presence is one of the few moments in the show where he appears genuinely at peace, not performing peace, actually experiencing it. There is a scene in season 4 where Tommy sits alone with a horse in a stable. He doesn't say anything. He just sits. And the camera holds on him in a way that it never does in any other context. Steady, unhurried, patient. The scene is unnecessary from a plot perspective. Nothing happens. No information is conveyed. No story is advanced. But it tells you something that 6 seasons of dialogue cannot. Tommy Shelby is lonely. Not alone, he's surrounded by people constantly. Lonely. The horse is the only living thing in his world that doesn't want something from him. The only thing that doesn't see him as a boss, a brother, a threat, or a means to an end. The horse just sees a man, and for 30 seconds in a stable. That's enough. The show was originally planned for 7 seasons. Knight envisioned the story ending in 1939. They are central to the Shelby business. The family starts as bookmakers at horse races, but they also serve a visual function that I think is easy to overlook. Tommy is frequently shown on horseback, walking a horse through the streets, riding alone across fields. The horse connects Tommy to an older, pre-industrial England, a time before cars, before factories, before the war that broke everything. When Tommy is on a horse, he looks like he belongs to a different era. When he steps off and into a car, he belongs to the modern world. The horse is Tommy's last connection to something authentic, something that existed before the trenches. The show was originally planned for 7 seasons. Knight envisioned the story ending in 1939 with the outbreak of World War II. The plan was compressed to 6 seasons when the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted production and Helen McCrory's death forced significant creative changes. The story's conclusion was then redirected into a feature film, Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, which picks up in 1940, with Tommy living in exile while his son Duke runs the business. The film, released in 2026, features Barry Keoghan as an older Duke, Tim Roth as a Nazi agent, and Rebecca Ferguson in an undisclosed role. Cillian Murphy returns as Tommy. The film was shot partly in Birmingham, a deliberate choice by Knight, who insisted that the story return to the city where it began. "You can't separate the two," Murphy said at the premiere. "Steve has written it from stories he was told by his parents growing up here." Knight's vision for the Peaky Blinders universe extends beyond the film. He has discussed potential spin-offs set in different eras, following different members of the Shelby family. Whether these materialize depends on factors that Knight, characteristically, does not seem worried about. He dreams things into existence. He always has. And I think that's the final thing worth saying about Peaky Blinders. It is a show that should not have worked. A BBC Two drama about a Birmingham street gang in the 1920s, starring an Irish actor doing an accent most English people find unattractive, scored with music from a century after its setting. Written by a man from the Midlands who based it on stories his grandmother told him. None of this sounds like a prescription for global success. None of this sounds like the kind of show that would inspire men worldwide to buy flat caps and practice their 1,000-yard stare in the bathroom mirror. But it worked because Knight understood something that most period drama creators don't, that the past is not a museum. It's a mirror. The problems of the 1920s are the problems of the 2020s. The trauma of war, the corruption of power, the exploitation of the working class, the rise of fascism, the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. These are not historical themes. They are permanent themes. And by telling them through the story of one family, one broken, violent, fiercely loyal family, Knight made them personal. He made them specific. He made them the kind of story you want to hear at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep, which, come to think of it, is exactly what's happening right now. If you've made it this far, you are either a dedicated fan of the Shelby family or you fell asleep somewhere around the Tom Hardy segment, which is understandable because Hardy's energy, even described secondhand, has a way of either waking you up or exhausting you into unconsciousness. I get it. Either way, the story is here whenever you come back. The Peaky Blinders are waiting. They always are. In the smoke, in the shadows, in that space between the fact and the fiction where the best stories live. The space Stephen Knight calls the smoky space in between. The space where a small-time Birmingham gang became a global phenomenon. The space where a boy from the Midlands heard stories from his grandmother and turned them into something that makes strangers in Tokyo and Sao Paulo and Lagos buy flat caps and practice looking dangerous. The smoke clears, eventually. The story doesn't. There's always more lore to tell. I'll be here when you come back.